Welcome, Jeffrey, and thank you for participating in this series. Feel free to begin.
Thank you for inviting me.
I don't want to hear.
But as Eric introduced, the title of my talk is Dive into History at Home, French Colonial Blacksmith Shops and VR Museums. A little bit of a crash course on what virtual reality is. Sometimes it's called VR for short. It takes the form of a headset that you wear on your head with motion controllers, and it immerses a user within a video game-like environment. So it's as if you're really within that video game. Museums have been facing challenges during these COVID times, expanding their outreach into virtual exhibits for the public to experience and at the comfort and safety of their own home. Some of the museums are creating online collections include the Smithsonian Institution, the National Gallery of Art, and the Cleveland Museum of Art. So my particular research interest is exploring new ways in which to bring these collections to people through technology. My first VR museum was titled VR Museum Blacksmithing Through Time. It was originally developed as part of my MA thesis titled Virtual Realities and Archaeology, employing the Oculus Rift for artifact visualization and education. It is currently published and publicly available on the Oculus Store, which is a specialized app store for virtual reality games. It educates the player about the blacksmithing craft and about the archaeology of blacksmith shops. This is the logo of the VR Museum, Blacksmithing Through Time. This is one of the exhibit rooms in the Blacksmithing VR Museum. This room shows hammers, tongs, and an anvil. We have a couple hammers, large one in the middle, tong to the side, and in the left is an anvil. These were all 3D scanned through a process called photogrammetry of real objects. So this anvil actually is a real anvil that has survived from the 1800s that was made in England. My research was very interested in exploring how to tie these real world artifacts into a virtual space so that this hammer here is much larger than it would be in real life, and that you can approach it and see detail that you might otherwise not be able to see. But that same hammer is in a real world scale on a table in the back. The virtual reality opens up a lot of possibilities of making new scales of artifacts and visualizing them in new ways than otherwise possible. And these objects, for the small life-sized ones on the table, the user can pick these up with the motion controllers as if they're actually picking up the real-world artifact. This hallway exhibits artwork depicting blacksmiths. As will later be shown, this hallway inspired a second VR museum dedicated to art. So here's one of the paintings where a blacksmith specializing as a farrier is horseshoeing a horse. And this painting was from the 1800s. There's a new dimension on focusing not just on objects, but also artwork to complement the museum exhibits. This room of the VR Museum depicts a plan view of the Griswold shop, which is then shown in reconstructed form in another part of the museum. We have the forge, a bellows, the anvil, and a workbench. The forge is where the blacksmith would heat up the metal by pumping air through the bellows, and the anvil stand is where he would hammer the metal into shape. This is a screenshot of the reconstructed blacksmith shop. This is all digital. It is a reconstruction based on the original shop layout as described by McBride in 1987. This included the dimensions of the shop and the locations of the forge, anvil, workbench, and windows. The wall height and ceiling had to be estimated based on what felt like a natural ceiling height in VR and compared to surviving blacksmith shops and living history museums. So this location for the anvil, the forge, the workbench, all line up to the previous room with the plan map. One of the benefits of virtual reality is that when you have the headset on, it looks as if you're actually standing within this room. So the ceiling is relatively low. It's just above the player's head. You can actually move your head up for yourself, and it's as if you have rafters right above you. And you might even feel like you have to dodge these lanterns. This is another shop that I reconstructed in the VR Museum. This shop was based on the layout of the one at Fort St. Joseph in Ontario, not the Michigan one, it's the Ontario one, by Light in 1984. The dimensions of this shop had to be scaled up so visitors to the VR Museum could navigate the space. Otherwise, the density of objects would hinder navigation. This image shows 3 of the 4 spaces that Light associates with blacksmith shops. First is a workspace in the back of the forge with the anvil hidden right behind this pillar, the forge, and the workbench. Second is domestic space with a table on the right of the image. This is where the blacksmith could take lunch breaks or conduct business meetings. Third is storage space on the left, where supplies are kept out of the way of other spaces. There is also a ladder leading to further storage space in the rafters. There is a 4th space not shown, the refuse space, which is outside the shop for discarded coal and metal. These are the main spaces associated with blacksmith shops that are found in many different archaeological sites that feature the blacksmith shop. Not all of these are present in the same shop. One might forego the domestic space, for instance, but most important is the workspace. The layout within that is usually very similar of close proximity of the forge, the anvil, and the workbench. And there's almost always a separate storage space away from the workspace. After I published the VR Museum Blacksmithing same time, I decided to expand upon that idea of the artwork in the hallway to create a whole museum dedicated to art called VR Museum Art Through Time. This is a view of the VR Museum Art Through Time. It took the concept established in that one hallway and expanded it to artwork more broadly and as a singular focus of this museum. The theme of the artwork throughout the exhibit spaces of this museum, the depiction of landscapes and archaeological sites through time. Some are fantastical interpretations of an ancient past, while others attempt to capture a snapshot of the artist's view. An unexpected benefit of VR that I found while developing this is how close I could get to the artwork to see fine detail. And as the artwork filled more of my field of view, the more it felt like I could enter the world of the artwork. Because I could almost physically walk up with a headset on to get close to these paintings. And as this painting took up the entire range of my eyesight, the museum space itself disappeared, and it was only that painting that I could see. And then it became as if I had stepped into that artwork. Although this image doesn't really show it, I also have furniture set up around the exhibits so that visitors can sit on virtual couches to gaze at the artwork. User feedback that I've received appears to suggest this to be an appreciated feature where they can rest in their real world chairs alongside the virtual ones. And it's one of these seating locations. It's poking out the edge of the screenshot. Painting over here shows an arch, as a painter had shown it at his current time. But some of these other works of art are more of a fantasy setting, where they're combining different archaeological sites into something that's new, into one image. I find it fascinating to see all together a timeline of these paintings, that I have it in chronological order, where it goes from less realistic paintings to more and more realistic, and at the same time that for some, the painter depicted what was then contemporary for the artist. But now it is the historical past and provides insight into that past landscape. These are some of the links that would be interesting with my master's thesis. And then the links for both of the VR museums, both of which are publicly available. And I have websites for the VR museums that you can go to if you want to see more information about them. One is drakenworks.com, DRACANWORKS.com.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jeff. That was really nice. So thank you for everyone else sticking around for the Q&A. If you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and type them in the chat for me. I have a couple to start off, and then I've got a couple that I've received already as well. So to start, how long does it take to develop the VR museums in terms of time?
For the first one, the blacksmithing one, it took me several years of prototyping. But once I had that established, the art museum took me just a couple months because I already had all the base concepts established.
Okay. What do you think is the most time-consuming part? Is it the photogrammetry, or is it just setting up kind of the digital space in general?
It would probably be the programming that is involved with the virtual reality aspect to get the headset and motion controllers working properly, to have a navigation system so you can walk around the museum and to interact with all of the objects.
Okay. So when you say interact, as one person asked if you can pick up the items?
Mm-hmm. Almost all of the small objects within the VR museums, you can pick up by grasping the motion controller, and you move it around with your own hand.
Okay, cool. So you kind of get that real life experience.
Mm-hmm.
If you are in a VR museum, do you actually walk around with the headset on, or do you use a controller to move forward, backward, etc.?
I have a teleportation system where if you move a part of the controller, it'll show a ring on the floor and you select where you want to go. And it'll send you directly to that spot. Or you can walk around with yourself to a limited degree.
Okay. Have you actually had any experience blacksmithing, or how did you get this kind of idea to actually use a blacksmith for your first VR museum?
I am a blacksmith myself that I started in high school. And I was a newsletter editor for my local blacksmithing group. So my interest of blacksmithing developed alongside my interest of archaeology.
Are you able to add new exhibits? And if so, would you? What else would you like to add to any of your VR museums?
I can add in new exhibits. For the blacksmithing one, I have been working on a couple new maps. It's just a matter of I have signs set up that I can send players to any new location that I create. So with the art one, that became such a different experience that I decided to send it to a whole new VR museum. So whenever there's enough of a difference, I'll just create a new experience that's built on the same concept, but within each one, I can build upon it as well.
Can you go to the links with a VR gaming headset and then download it, or how do you access your VR museum for the Oculus Rift?
The links will go to a store page specifically for Oculus. It's like an app store, and then you'll need a Oculus headset in order to run them with a PC.
Okay.
So it requires a specific hardware, unfortunately.
Okay. And then you purchase it. Is it something that is expensive or the everyday user could afford?
The blacksmithing one, I have it $4.99. The art one is just $2.99. So I meant to make it be relatively affordable.
Yeah. Are you continuing to expand? What kind of touches on that? And could you reconstruct an entire archaeological site? So we'll go with that second part. Could you reconstruct an entire archaeological site if you would like to?
Given enough data that I could reconstruct a whole site, part of the challenge is to have enough information to accurately reconstruct the site. A lot of it is guesswork.
Okay. But for instance, so I know that I don't think you've actually visited our site at Fort St. Joseph, but if I gave you the plan view map with the grid outlines and where a lot of the features are, you could digitally reconstruct that.
I could model the whole fort if I wanted to.
Oh, that's pretty sweet. That would look awesome. Okay, and then I think there's one more coming in that I have. Oh, let me see. Gordon, do you have a question? Are you raising your hand? Hold on, Jeff. I think I'm getting another question from somebody. Can you stop sharing your screen, Jeff, so I can see the participants? And then Gordon, if you have a question, go ahead and say it out loud. Oh, there it comes. I got it. Okay. So did you say that you could put artifacts in motion, so possibly cause them to interact? So could you, I think if I'm understanding the question right, could you use them in the virtual reality? If you're grabbing on one, could you have it interact to another artifact in a way?
Pretty much the potential is endless, that it's almost exactly the same type of technology for video games that I'm using for this, so that anything that I can program, I can do. The challenge is just to program it.
And then what type of software do you use to create?
For the game engine that runs all of the putting all the pieces together and running it on the computer, I'm using Unreal Engine 4, which is the same engine used by Fortnite.
Oh,
if anyone
okay.
happens to know that game.
Yeah, and that's really popular too. So do they run very similar? Because kids really enjoy that. I have 4 nephews and they love that game.
The foundations are the same.
Okay. That might be something to look into.
The main difference is that Fortnite's for non-VR can run it on pretty much any system, and mine's specifically virtual reality.
Right. So it kind of puts you right in there. I remember that when I tried it in grad school, I think you had me at the top of a skyscraper or something, and it was very real. Another question is, can you include things like lectures and talks as exhibits, like where you're kind of sitting down and looking at that way, pretending like you're there? So
I could put in a video on a screen and audio cues. And there's also some recent VR games that I didn't make but have tried out are exploring ways to have for instance, veterans from World War II give narratives in VR as if you're sitting in front of them.
Oh, wow. That sounds really nice. Is there anything that you would like to, do you see yourself doing with this and your business in the next couple of years? Is there any projects that you have coming up or that you want to kind of tie into what you already have going on?
I am continuing to develop these VR museums, that there's more work that I can do on them, particularly with the VR implementation, polish that, create more interaction. I'm looking into a couple new objects that it's something that I want to continually work on along the side whatever I end up doing.
Okay. I think that oh, no. Do you have the VR equipment that you can travel with and take to places so others could try it? So if you could kind of, they call them like the travel trunks, where it's kind of like instead of the exhibit material, it would be like you with your VR stuff, and you could go go into a classroom or go into a museum setting, and then the people could experience it that way.
My particular hardware is a desktop with a wired headset, but there are laptops available that you could connect a headset to and take it with you in that way. And there's also standalone headsets now where it's completely wireless. All you need is a headset.
So do you download that onto the headset somehow to where you just turn on the headset and go?
So my VR museums right now are only for the desktop version. But at some point I might port it over to the standalone one.
What would you need to actually port it over, as you said?
That part of it is the performance, to get it that you don't want to have it too low of frames per second, that it's like a video. So the higher the frames, the better it is. And it's just a matter of the hardware, whether it can do that or not, the way the VR museums currently are. And it's just a matter of investing into the new hardware for myself.
And then, so I kind of have a question. How much, in the ballpark, do you know, is a standalone headset, just for anyone that's out there in an educational setting that would like to kind of purchase this to show those who attend their museum, or do you know off the top of your head?
I think it was around $300.
Okay, so pretty affordable if you're
Mhm.
going to kind of use it for a public outreach then.
For the standalone headset, that's the $300, and you only need the headset.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then we have a comment here that says, thank you for sharing. This is really interesting. They are pretty glad about the innovative use for VR technology in this type of work. So, all right, I think if there are no more questions, we will kind of sign off for the night. We had a great discussion and this was really interesting. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for sharing.